If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. There's no such thing as a haunted house. He hooked his thumbs in his belt loops and looked up at the house. Try seeing her for the masterpiece she really is. Pointing up at the roof, he said, see the fancy corbels under the eaves? Trina had no idea what a corbel was. But she knew that she saw nothing but gray weathered wood. Sure, she said. And just think about sitting on the porch and sipping lemonade all afternoon, or sliding down the porch railing into the front yard. Almost fifth graders were also too old for sliding down railings, and there was no porch. And the front yard was an overgrown mass of weeds. But Trina nodded anyway. Arguing with Papa at a time like this would be as hopeless as that old house. And that turret. That what? Trina said, feeling her voice getting sadder and sadder. The little tower with the pointed roof. He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, Rapunzel, Rapunzel! Right then, as if answering his call, a small bird darted from its nest in the eaves, which made Trina wonder what else might be living in that big abandoned house. The turret is fit for a princess just like you. Windows on all the sides for a view of our own country gardens. Then he yanked one of the tall yellow flowers from the ground, roots and all. Look at all these weeds. No wonder they call her Goldenrod. Who? The house. That's the house's name. Sure. The house has a name? Sure she does. And isn't she amazing? She's what you might call a grande dame. He bowed to the house as if it were royalty. I am honored to make your acquaintance, Madame Goldenrod. Trina looked up at Madame Goldenrod, but the only amazing thing about her was that she was still standing. Even so, she tried to play along with her dad's giant dream, even if she tried to imagine the house with a coat of paint. She's such a beautiful... But there was nothing at all beautiful about this house. Trina's eyes shifted from the drab, clapboard house to the sparkling meadow of yellow goldenrod. Yellow, she said, trying to sound excited. After all, yellow was her mother's favorite color. Then yellow shall be, her dad said. He took the steps, nothing but stacked bricks and rotted planks, two at a time, and playfully knocked to the faded no trespassing sign tacked to the door. The key's under the mat, Trina reminded him, but that didn't matter. One of the big wooden double doors creaked open all on its own, and he stepped inside. Trina slowly went up the makeshift steps and paused as the door opened. She lifted a corner of the ragged doormat, which was anything but welcoming, and there was no key. She peeled away the doormat completely, revealing a rectangle of dark wood where the doormat had sat forever, but still no key. Trina, her dad's distant voice called. Coming, she said. But with her first step across the threshold into the pitch-black house, she felt like she was coming into someplace where she didn't belong. As if the darkness was a suspicious old lady, her white cobweb hair tied up in a bun, standing with her dusty hands on her hips, blocking Trina's way. Trina stopped dead in her tracks, wishing she had stayed in the truck. Power must be off, her dad said. He called from somewhere in the darkness. Shoot, he said as Trina heard him slap his pockets. No flashlight. Luckily I have my lighter. A tiny dot of flame appeared like a lightning bug. The creaks of his footsteps moved farther away, taking the dot of light with them. And then something squealed like a mad cat. Popo, Trina yelled, scared that the house had gotten him. It's just a squeaky door, he hollered back. More doors squeaked and boots clomped down hollow steps. He must have been heading to the basement to turn on the electricity. If a house this old even had electricity... The air inside the house was thick, and somehow it even smelled forgotten. The door tickled her nose as she sneezed so hard the noise echoed around her, making her feel very small and very alone. Except for the strange feeling that she wasn't. A light came on in a distant room. It was dim and flickering, but Trina could see enough to know that it was standing in a foyer that she was standing in a foyer as big as a hotel lobby. In front of her was a grand staircase that reached into the blackness of the second floor, while the rest of the house stretched off forever and ever into the shadows. "Man, is our work cut out for us," her dad said, his voice bouncing in the emptiness. "But she has steam heat, and someone delivered us a brand new refrigerator, washer, and dryer. And lucky for you, I passed a bathroom on my way to the basement, right by the servants' stairs." He pushed the top button of the odd-looking light switch on the wall, and a few dusty bulbs of fancy chandelier with beads and prisms lit up high above Trina's head. The speckled light revealed pale wood floors, but the banisters, doors, and archways were made of dark wood. "Look at this place," he said. "The whole house is trimmed in mahogany." Mahogany schmogany. The house was dark and creepy, and it smelled like a cellar. "It's steam heat. Is steam heat a good thing?" "Steam heat's amazing," he said, standing at the tips of his boots to examine the tarnished brass sconce mounted on the wall. "Watch this," he said as he turned a valve on the bottom of the sconce and it flicked his lighter. A flame shot up out of the top of the sconce at the same time an electric bulb glowed beneath it. They didn't trust electricity back then, so the fixtures used gas too. Then, without a word, he sprinted past the staircase, pushed open two fancily carved sliding doors, and pulled them shut again, leaving Trina by herself in the foyer. "Pocket doors!" he shouted. His voice was muffled. "I think I'm in the library." There are built-in bookcases everywhere. Before Trina had a chance to be scared, he slid the doors back open. Trina was actually curious about the library. Maybe books had been left behind. She'd be happy for any sign that people had really lived here once. But one look around the big dreary room made her heart sink. The library shelves and forest's worth of mahogany were completely empty. Trina stayed close to her dad as they walked past the deep, blackened fireplace toward another pair of pocket doors. These doors led to the darkest of rooms. "Ah, the smoking room," her dad said, inhaling deeply. "You can still smell the burning pipe tobacco." Even with the light on, the room was really dark. Her dad spotted a doorknob nearly invisible in the heavy paneling and turned it. "Look, a secret passageway." Trina was afraid he'd leave her alone again, so she grabbed hold of his t-shirt and followed him. "Where are we, Papo?" Trina asked as they walked down the passageway in the darkness. "Under the stairs," he said. "And if I'm right, this room will be..." He paused to open the second door to another disappearingly empty room with another dusty chandelier. "The dining room, just as I suspected." Trina let go of his t-shirt. "Man, look at that buffet," her dad said, pointing at the long cupboard with a big mirror above it. "And those French doors must lead outside," he added, glancing at the wall of boards. As he kept going, passing under the spindled archway into the room as big as a school gym, which had a huge fireplace and another elaborate chandelier. From there, Trina could see the archway that led back to the foyer. Trina sensed that whoever or whatever had met her at the front door was still standing there, waiting. Trina quickly turned back on the foyer. "Is this the living room?" "Yep. But I think they called them parlors back then." His voice was muffled again. This time he was reaching up inside the chimney. Metal clanked against metal, and he forced open the flue. When he crawled back out, a look of deep concern crossed his face. She's got good bones, but Trina waited for the next word, wondering if he felt the presence of someone in the house the way she did. She held her breath, and he looked up from the boarded-up bay window to the curling wallpaper and crackled plaster on the ceiling. She has good bones, but what? He kicked at a bit of fallen plaster. She suffered from being empty. The hair on Trina's arms prickled. What do you mean? A house goes downhill when no one lives in it. It needs people. People who love it. He wiped his sooty hands on his pants. I guess I'm saying she needs us. Trina didn't like thinking of a house as something that needed her. I think it's too much work, Popo. Nah, nothing stops us, he said with a big grin. And then he put his hand on her shoulder. I bet some lunch will perk you up. The kitchen is back this way, he said, pointing through the dining room. I'll get the cooler. At the far end of the dining room was a swinging door that screeched as Trina pushed through it into what had to be the butler's pantry because it was full of a million empty cabinets with leaded glass doors. She pushed through another swinging door and finally arrived at the kitchen, big enough for 10 cooks. The walls were covered with white tiles, and the sink was nearly as big as a bathtub. Above the sink was a boarded-up window, and between the sink and the big black stove was a doorway to a small bathroom. A boarded-up black door and a plain, narrow staircase that led both up and down. The